Thank you for opening the pod bay doors, Hal.
You're welcome, Kevin.
Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. We're aboard the Discovery, but we're actually doing a Star Frontiers video. This is based on a video I watched a long time ago on Tabletop Taproom. My good friend Tom Vero, who also goes by Gédion, he was discussing, I think it was the final days of Star Frontiers, what ended up happening there, and he mentioned something as a passing remark that I thought, wait, no, what? What he said was that the 2001 and 2010 modules that came out for Star Frontiers back in the 80s were the worst modules made for Star Frontiers. And I was like, wait, no, what? I like these. These are good. What's the problem? So I thought I would reread them and research them, and I wanted to discuss. Now, I thought, when he said the worst modules of Star Frontiers, I was like, wait a minute. There are some pretty big contenders. I mean, Sundown on Star Mist? But you know what? That does have a nice kind of a surprise loop to it that I thought, okay, I like that one. Mission to Alcazar, but I actually asked around because I read that and I didn't think it was all that great. It's a very generic module, not bad, but not stellar. I asked around with the Star Frontiers community, and a good chunk of them were like, no, that's one of our favorites. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess not those. And everybody knows I'm not the biggest fan of how Crash on Volturnus starts off. So, yeah, maybe that isn't a great one. But you know what? You could kind of give Volturnus a pass. It's the first time out of the gate. There are little sentient running around fire creatures on that world. But, okay, it's the first time the writers are trying something and whatever. So, okay, maybe none of those are the worst module, but 2001 and 2010, these are awesome. But are they? Are they really? Is that just me and my affection for 2001 and HAL and the Discovery? Is that just that coming through? I mean, after all, I have played chess against HAL. So there is there's a nostalgia for me, and I'll go briefly down that because it's sort of related to this release for Star Frontiers. When I was 11 years old or so, Star Wars came out. Everybody was talking science fiction, and I looked in a lot of books and like, tell me about science fiction. And if it wasn't schlocky Buck Rogers stuff from the 30s, the only other real reference to science fiction other than Star Wars was 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is a beloved movie, and I thought, okay, I don't know anything about this movie. I watched it. And I remember coming out of it thinking, I was actually at a friend's house, and I was babysitting. It was on late at night on a channel. I was babysitting for some kids, and I was like, oh, let's watch that 2001 that everybody raves about. And I remember thinking, oh, that was awful. But years later, it was showing one afternoon, a friend of mine and I were sitting there, and he had read the books. And he said, wait a minute. Here's what's happening in each chapter of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And when you've got somebody there to explain to you what's happening, it's a brilliant work of art. Both the story, Arthur C. Clarke, and the movie, Stanley Kubrick, I now get why people love it. And I actually got it on videotape back in the day. Now I have it on Blu-ray or DVD. Both, actually. And it's a little bit like Blade Runner in a way, in that you watch it once, you get the general gist of what happens in the story. You watch it again and you notice little things, little hints, little references to stuff that I had missed on my previous viewings. So I was like, oh. And then I would watch it again and see even more. It's one of those films, like Blade Runner, it's one of those films that it just keeps giving you more and more stuff as you watch it. And I developed a huge love for 2001. So when this came out back in 1984, I'm going to say, 84? Yes, 84, I think. Anyway, when this module came out, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, come on, I gotta get 2001. And then the sequel, 2010, yeah. And I was thinking someday I would put my players through it. Never did get around to it. But it always held a very strong spot in my affection. It's 2001. And to be honest, if you like 2001, this is really good. But I think the point that Tom and various other people were making, because I've read a few reviews online of these modules as a player, it doesn't translate into a gaming experience very well. Now, I would have argued, and I'll go into a little bit of the detail here, spoilers if you've never seen either of these movies, and spoilers for these modules. So if you're planning on doing the worst Starfrontiers modules ever, I'm about to wreck them, so be warned in advance. But I remember when I was reading through this originally, when I first got it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is great. This is so in line with what happens in the movie. I remember thinking to myself, it's like the Blade Runner PC game that came out, which I also talked about, where you're treading in the same world as the characters that we saw in the movie. And that's so well done. It's so cool to go back to these spots that you saw in the movie and to wander around in them in a game experience. That's what I like about these. But I wonder if Tom and various other Starfrontiers fans and people who have written these reviews online, maybe they're right. Maybe this is garbage. Okay, so let's start with the first one. 2001 in the movie and the book, which I've read, right off the bat, here's something you don't get in a lot of modules. This, like the movie, begins at the dawn of man, when we are nothing more than bipedal apes, and we are scratching our existence out of the landscape. Like, this actually has a whole section. I'll show you the map here. There's a whole section here where you need to actually go and keep the valley that you live in under your kind of territory. There are other tribesmen who come along. Oh, and be prepared, that's the only combat that happens in these Starfrontiers modules. But, like, I remember thinking to myself, wow, how many modules actually take you back to the dawn of civilization? African wilderness, 4 million BC. Not a lot of modules are going to do that, so that's a brave choice. And it's like in the movie, the film, the Stanley Kubrick film, starts with primitive man trying to survive on the verge of extinction, because there's not really much that these little weak apes can do compared to all of the other beasts of the savannah. Now, in the film and in this, a monolith appears which sparks within humanity the earliest use of tools, the beginning of our intelligence, our technological world, the thing that manages to let us survive in this universe. And further chapters occur. But in the module, yeah, you are told to roll up or to create these little ape creatures, and you're going around on that map, and you're trying to keep the water well going, and it's flipping your typical adventure module, whether it's D&D or Gamma World or anything. It's flipping it on its head. Like, you're doing something you don't really get to experience a lot in other modules. You're trying to eke out an existence as a caveman. How many games do that? Not too many. So I really liked that about this. Now, in the movie and in the game, in the module, the monolith appears. You roll some dice. There are different experiences for the players than there were right out of the film, but basically you are now on your route to the humanity that we all understand today, the next step in our evolution. And then the module chapter ends. And much like in the movie, we are suddenly in the 90s. Ooh, the futuristic 90s, where there are bases on the moon. And we catch up with Heywood Floyd, who is going there because another monolith, possibly the same one, I think, yes, in the book, I think they establish that the monolith that had taught the apes then vanishes and goes and takes up residence on the moon. Now, in the module, what they do, in the movie, you follow Heywood, he goes to the Tycho crater where the monolith was dug up, and that leads to the next step in the story. But what they do in the Star Frontiers module, I thought was really smart. They turn that into like this espionage thing, because there are hints in the book and very briefly in the film that America's not getting along great with Russia and China. Boy, how things have changed. And you can play Americans, Chinese, Russians, or others in the module. You can be different teams. You will get approached by agents from different governments. Like, there's a whole level of intrigue that goes on. And in the middle chapter, what you are doing is you are using the vehicles that are moon hoppers, I think they're called. It looks like they're flying in the show, in the movie, but in the book and in here, it's established they're actually just gracefully leaping from spot to spot. They're called moon hoppers for that reason, and you are set a big map of the lunar landscape, and in the module it says, instead of it just being Tycho, why not randomly choose? This is, you can, as the referee, you choose where the monolith is buried. Now you've got your teams, your players, all jumping around, racing across the lunar landscape to try and find it. And I thought, yeah, for something that's kind of a very brief part of the movie and the books, you've gamified it. You've made it interesting. That's awesome. In the story, once the sun strikes the monolith, it sends a radio beam to Jupiter. And that takes us to the third chapter, both in the movies and in this module. The best section that I love, which is the discovery. Frank Poole, Dave Bowman, and Hal 9000. Good old Hal, doing your thing. Anyway, so in this, what I really, really appreciated here, they map out the discovery perfectly. I don't know if the people who wrote this were in touch with the production crew of the 68 film, but everything that you see as you walk around, as it links around from spot to spot, it's actually accurate and correct to what we saw in the film. Stanley Kubrick was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a lot of people were happy with the fact that he had racked up a huge bill to make the 2001 film and make the centrifuge work and to make the pod bay and all that stuff. All of that stuff was a big expense, but it paid off in the film, and it pays off in this because we are actually in exactly the same spots that we saw in the film. However, this is where my love of the module does tend to weaken a little bit, and that is when this module came out in the 80s. I don't know how well known the 2001 film was to your average person, let's say in a game store. I don't know, because there's a line in this module that even says there's a chance your players may have seen the film or read the book. If you can, coerce them to just ignore the bit about Hal. And I'm like, how do you forget about Hal? Like, he's pretty iconic. And today, he's synonymous with GLaDOS and evil things that go on. My God, he appears in the Lego game, for God's sake. Like, everybody knows about Hal and his way of wanting to kill humanity. And so to sort of and ask the players, just ignore that for this purpose of this thing. I was like, okay, what are you doing? You're going to have to suspend the players' disbelief that they can just forget what happens in the movie. Now, maybe you luck out. Maybe you have players who never saw the film or read the books or anything like that. Admittedly, when I got this little personal assistant, Hal 9000, my brother-in-law was like, oh, what's that? I'm like, you don't know Hal 9000? Are you crazy? So, not everybody does, so that's fine. So if you are lucky enough to get those kind of people, but I think anybody who's playing Star Frontiers is a science fiction fan and they're going to know Hal. If you're lucky enough, maybe they don't know Hal's background story. If you aren't that lucky, this module kind of asks your players to just forget that you know all of that stuff. Let's move on and have a good time, shall we? Good luck with that. However, I do like the fact that this follows the book a little closer. Like even some of the doctors that are in hibernation, like the names that appear in here are the names of the frozen doctors in the book, not in the movie. So there is a close correlation between this and the work of Arthur C. Clarke. And you can thaw those doctors out and have them as part of the group if you want. So you are departing quite a lot from what happens in the book and the film. But generally speaking, the breakdown of communications occurs. You find out that Hal was wrong. It wasn't a communication breakdown. Now we've got a suspicious thing going on with what's happening with Hal. The module it leans into, I sure hope you have a way to do this with your players. And I think in the hands of a really, really skilled referee, you could make this work. But I think this module is really asking a lot of a typical referee. Like, you've got to not only ask your players to just forget what they know about the movie and Hal and all his famous scenes and, open the pod bay doors and all that kind of stuff. You're also now going off the rails into a different area. It's a little bit getting led through the nose in this, but there are areas where you can break free of what happens in the story and you can proceed, but it doesn't work. So maybe for that reason, I will agree that 2001, the module, and at the end, which is the psychedelic trip to another dimension, what is the payoff for players sitting around a table? An audience watching this on screen is emotionally invested and is taken on a mind trip to another place and time. And that's cool. And Stanley Kubrick, I remember hearing, I think Rock Hudson walked out of the film. He was just like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Like you're asking a lot of the audience in the film to then make the leap of faith that the book, that the adventure module takes. I mean, it does kind of resolve in a weird way. You can roll, I think you either roll or you choose what is the final destiny of each of your characters. Because all 5 of you can be walking around in the weird space hotel room at the end of the film. Like, that's a possibility. And there are options to, like, go back in time or become the Star Child or whatever. Like, it throws... like with the original movie, it throws the players into whatever territory, and that's cool. And as a fan of 2001, I respect that. But I think that's what a lot of people reviewing this say is the problem. It's not a good adventure game. I have a feeling, now, this is going to come up with the second module here. I have a feeling somebody at TSR, whether it be... Who are the guys who wrote this? Frank Mincer. Whether it was Frank Mincer or some of the people around him, what always impressed me with Star Frontiers was the Nighthawk's rules are very scientific. They really apply a lot of what would really be like in space travel to the game. Love that. I've done a video about that. I think somebody may have thought, this is just like the stuff that happens in 2001. Why don't we make a 2001 crossover into Star Frontiers? Okay, but Star Frontiers is in another part of a galaxy with alien creatures, and it says right at the beginning, this is on Earth. You can't be a Dralosite or a Yazarian or anything. Okay, then why are you making it a Star Frontiers module? It doesn't make any sense. But a lot of the mechanics from Star Frontiers kind of follow suit into this, and I think somebody just thought, like that Blade Runner PC game, wouldn't it be great to wander around that thing that we established in the previous film? Yeah, but in Blade Runner, at least it's a case, and you're going around the city. You are forcing people into the discovery. You're forcing people to deal with Hal and to forget what Hal did to those people. That's a real leap. I don't think it's going to work. It worked for me. I don't know that it works for other players. So let's talk about the sequel. And I will gloss over this one because I don't find it as good. Now, it does introduce, or it does have, a lot of Nighthawks elements, which is very good, because the first one you're kind of, you're a caveman, then you're jumping around on the moon, and then next thing you know, you're on the Discovery, but you're not steering it or anything. In this game, or in this module, you are going to Jupiter, where the Discovery was lost contact with, aboard the Leonov, right there, the Russian ship. And you do have to make maneuvers and line up the ship, and at the end of the module, there's a whole, spoiler again, there's a whole escape sequence you have to do, and you have to do it as the commander, the person moving the ship tiles around on that map. It's got a good Nighthawks element to it. So I appreciated that. But, whereas in the movie, the book kind of goes into a little bit more elaboration about, okay, we're back with Heywood Floyd, and we're going to establish why they're going back to the Discovery, why they're going to Jupiter, and the Russians that are taking them there. In the module, the first couple of pages are all about dialogue with the Russian captain. Here are the sleeping chambers that you're going to lie down in. Here's all of this. I'm introducing you to elements of the Leonov, and that's great, but I kind of liked in the movie, there's a really good shot of Roy Scheider sort of looking at his kid, and then boom, we're at Jupiter, we're aboard the Leonov, and he's waking up. This doesn't have that finesse, that doesn't have that cinematic poetry. It's a little more clunky and kludgy, and that's unfortunately true of a lot of the stuff in this module. We get to Jupiter. Now, on the way, we encounter something is happening at Europa, which is just like in the film and just like in the book. And I do appreciate the fact that, unlike in the movie, you can opt for different ways of handling the Europa situation. You can send people there if you want, not just a probe like they do in the film. And you could encounter whatever that quick little shot is of green stuff in the movie, you encounter that in this. So I thought to myself, that's very cool that they've got a whole section there. If you go this direction or if you go that direction, we've got you covered. Good. Because most of the rest of the module doesn't have that level of fluidity or branching options. There seems to be a lot more railroading going on in this. The ship arrives at Jupiter. We see the Discovery, and it's spinning end over end, just like in the movie. And we spend an interesting time getting aboard and climbing around in a spinning ship. And then there's a lot of going through, repairing stuff, establishing, getting the Discovery to finish its spin and bring it in line with the Leonov, and that's cool. But I don't know what they were thinking of as a plot line. Okay, you're asking players to repair a ship. Is there a module, whether D&D or any other, is there a module where all you do is repair something, get something rebuilt back up? There's no combat in this. There's some sense of intrigue. But again, you're kind of just spending the first half of the whole module getting the Discovery powered up and back in line. It's a yawn fest. I mean, I appreciate it because I liked the sequel enough. It has its flaws, and this is very, very close to the sequel's storyline. But it's kind of... Now, again, like in the movie, where the characters have no agency of their own, they are a victim of the plot that they are written into, they turn Hal back on. Wasn't that smart to do? But they also are suspicious of him, and they take care around him. Dr. Floyd has a off switch just in case. This kind of thing goes on. In this module, I'm just okay, you've already asked a lot of people with that other module to ignore that Hal was a homicidal maniac. Now you're getting players to turn him back on voluntarily. What intelligent player would ever do that? And what I found was a little bit of a nitpick for me on this module was the fact that in the movie and in the book, Hal is a complex character. It's not that he's just plain old evil. there is a nuance there. He is a childlike early form of intelligence learning his way around, and some people tried to turn him off. So he dealt with that in one way in the first film, or the first film and the first book. In the sequel book and movie, he is still his very calm, very relaxed self that I'm a little concerned was going to kill people. But he's never... There are moments, at least in the film version, where he could do something to wreck, to be the bad guy, to be the antagonist of the film again, and he isn't. There's a nuance, there's an art to how Hal is portrayed in the second film. And in this module, straight up in the write-up, it says, yeah, he's still a psychopath, and he's still going to try and kill people. I'm like, whoa, really? Okay, you're going there, are you? So that's fine. I mean, I guess it's an adventure module, so you need to be a little less nuanced and a little more black and white. Okay, Hal's the bad guy, and he's going to mess stuff up. And there is a neat hook. Maybe I won't spoil the neat hook. There is a way toward the end where Hal could wreck things, and you have at your disposal a very neat, dramatic little hook that I quite enjoyed. I thought, okay, kudos to them for at least having that in there for the referee to... You've got your players sweating, and oh, thank God, because of A, B, and C, now it's not such a bad thing. I did like that. That was a good point. I was appreciative of that. Now, with getting into spoiler territory for the book and the movie and this module, Jupiter is going through a transformation, and you got to get yourselves out of there quick. There's no time to stay around. Your window of opportunity to fly home isn't for another 21 days. Dave Bowman reappears. There's a whole bit in the film and in this module where Bowman is back, and he warns everybody, you gotta leave in 2.5 days. Don't stay here. Well, we can't get out of here in 2.5 days. Oh no, now you got a new engineering feat, and now you're gonna be using the map and the Nighthawks rules in order to get yourselves to safety. That's kind of cool. There's a level of urgency, but that's A, the only bit of urgency that we've actually encountered so far, and there's been zero combat, and B, I understand, I get that the writers who made the module were thinking, okay, there's an 80% chance that this will happen, and then these characters have to do this for 2 hours. If they only do it for 1 hour, then that reduces their chance of success by 20%. There's a lot of like mechanical rolling of dice to see if things are successful. However, a problem is it doesn't easily explain what happens if you fail those dice rolls. Like, yeah, there's some fallbacks, but I was sitting here reading a lot of the things that they have to organize themselves to get out of here before Jupiter does some big transformation. And there's a lot of like, okay, then this might need to happen, and then you're gonna, if you miss your turn, then you're gonna have to redo it and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, but if I'm the referee, if I've just had some very bad dice rolls, my players are screwed. Like, this isn't well written on a get your players, be flexible with whatever your players are going to roll. This is not well written for that. It doesn't have that in mind. And that, I think, is a problem. I don't like the way the last part of the module is written. The movie did it quite well, but the way the module is written, I was just like, there's even a line in there of if you miss this or if you accidentally bump into that, the ship it crashes into the other ship or a moon or whatever, and your characters are dead. And I'm like, okay, so it's a very final curtain. There's like a very strict line in the sand of either you're really successful with all these rolls or you're dead. There's no kind of in between. I wasn't wild about that, so. And also, nitpick here, but what I loved with the previous module was how well they had mapped out the Discovery, and the same map is in here, but the map of the Leonov is like, it doesn't make any sense. It almost looks like they went to the set layout, and they were just like, well, we know he walks past this table, and we know there's a ladder there, and then we know that the medical area is over there, so we'll just flat out throw that onto the player map. And I'm like, but it doesn't line up. I mean, at least with the Discovery in this module, they did a very good job of here's the pod bay, and here's that. And in fact, here's a very minor nitpick as well. In both of these modules, they show down at the pod bay, you know the classic, the famous scene where Dave Bowman is preparing to go on the pod in the first time, and you've got that really cool corridor there? In these modules, that's up against the outer hull of the Discovery front area. And then in 2010, the movie, Roy Scheider is seen coming toward Dave Bowman in that hallway, but he's coming through a door, and I'm like, wait a minute, where does that door lead to? Because in these modules, that's the outer hull of the ship. Like, you guys you haven't paid attention. You could have used these modules, man. Anyway, whatever. Nitpick aside, that's minor. That's what that is. But I think I'll stop there. So 2010 is really it's clunky and kludgy. It has some good moments. It has its redeeming features, but I would agree it is a pretty bad module. I was appreciative of it as a sequel to this module because I really liked 2001. I thought it was really good. We are treading the territory that was in the original film. We can walk around the same decks. We can interact with Hal. This is great. But the worst Starfrontiers modules? I mean, that seems very unfair. But maybe they're right. You know, like having reread these now years later, I'm kind of like, I guess I need to recall that not everything is as good as it was in my memory. We'll go with that. Anyway, well, I'm gonna have to deal with Hal now at some point. I have a feeling a trip to his memory center is coming my way. I better not say it too loud, though. He is listening. All right, well, until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.